Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am very, very happy to have the chance to introduce for us today really a practitioner of cultural diplomacy, I think in the best sense of the word, in his previous life, in his current life, and I think also in his future life. Ben Moses is somebody who really has had a very rich and a very full career. I would say, in essence, in the field of film and media, but also beyond. He shares, similar to the ICD, a commitment to human rights, a commitment also to democracy and freedom of expression in every sense of the word. And allow me to say a few maybe more formal words about his background, but I think we all know his background. Ben Moses was initially born in 1948 as an American documentarian, television producer, director, writer, and filmmaker, best known for Good Morning Vietnam and the documentary A Whisper to a Roar. Moses has been the executive in charge of television production and programming for General Electric, executive producer of the ABC TV affiliate in Washington, D.C., and was a producer for Young and Rubicam Advertising in New York. And one of the interesting projects that I think you all know we've been involved with a little bit has been his recent interest when it came to the Ukraine. You were explaining to me last night, I guess it all started with a dinner that you had with some friends in the Ukraine about a year ago, where I think on the one hand you noticed the urgency of everything that was actually unraveling at that point in the Ukraine, and you also noticed the potential of one young woman, Yulia Maroshevska, who actually then later on you helped to film this little clip. I am Ukrainian. I think we've all seen this. Actually, everybody here I think has met Yulia for the most part. Almost everybody in this room, because they were actually here when Yulia was here. So I don't need any further introduction about Yulia. But it's really amazing to see how the story of Yulia has really been a voice that you've actually helped to bring across the world. I think it's now over 8 million hits, with the YouTube. She just spoke in Canada. She was on a big tour in the USA. Was immediately offered fellowships from Harvard as well as Stanford. And in many ways really has a voice now that's having a positive impact. She's officially, I guess, advisor to the Minister of Culture in the Ukraine. Elections are coming up soon, and I think there's a lot that she can offer her country nationally and internationally. And I think not only, but I think a lot of that credit goes to you and actually the support that you've been able to offer her. So for many reasons, it's really a very special honor to host you here, Ben. We've asked Ben to talk to us just a little bit about also the power of social media, the power of media, and maybe even a few words about actually the power of film as a catalyst for culture diplomacy, how these various medium can help us to actually bring people together who wouldn't normally come together, give voices to individuals who normally maybe wouldn't have the voice, and transcend borders. So we look forward to having a brief presentation from you, and then of course we expect you all to have many questions, many comments, and we hope we can have an interactive discussion to continue. But first of all, let's give a very, very warm welcome for Mr. Ben Moses.
Usually, when people applaud, it's after I'm done. So thank you very much, and it's been nice being here. And maybe this is the highest point of the afternoon. It'll get lower from this point. So, I was a ham radio operator, a shortwave radio operator, as a kid, in a small town in Illinois, and in a farm town. And I had no communication with the outside world. I was one of those Americans who spoke one language, barely. And we were miles and miles and miles from another country, thousands of kilometers even to Canada, it seemed. And I was able to communicate via shortwave with people around the world. And even in my teenage years, talking to the president of Jordan, for example, the king of Jordan, for example, who was also a ham, and people in the Soviet Union and in other countries everywhere, it opened my eyes to communication and the idea that maybe there was some similarity between peoples, even though my particular small town culture felt like everybody outside of our culture was foreign and therefore not to be trusted. And luckily, my form of communication, amateur radio, was able to transcend that and leap over into other cultures and get acquainted with people that I otherwise would never have met from around the world. And that made me begin to doubt what I was taught in this small provincial town, that you don't trust anybody who doesn't speak your accent of your language, much less a foreign language. Even a different accent was suspect. And so that really opened my eyes to the world. And ever since that time, I have been interested in communication. I've learned languages. I've traveled because I really believed that, contrary to what they told me as a child, everybody who was outside my culture was not my enemy or not to be afraid of. And I learned, the more and more I traveled, I learned that we are all fundamentally alike. We all fundamentally have the same wishes and desires for our lives and our families, and we want peace, and we want to get along in the world, and we want to be able to feed ourselves and our children. And those fundamental similarities are really at the essence of what my life has been in communicating through my medium, which is film and television. And I find such a complete connection between what you all are doing here with the ICD, because it is ultimately cultural diplomacy. That which I started out as a child doing, that which all of you are doing, just getting to know people from other places and other cultures and other ways of life, that's all cultural diplomacy. And there is only one way to do it, and that is to reach out and talk to someone and meet them and touch them and say hello and have coffee or tea or a drink or something and get acquainted and learn other languages. And I applaud everybody here for being here, for coming to do that. You know better than I do about social media and how it works and why it works so well. I came up in the era of television and film and radio communication, and that was our way of reaching out, but that was often one direction. You are lucky enough to have it in two directions, and so I think the world will be better off because you can take it in both directions. You can give it and you can take it. You can communicate both ways. Mark was talking earlier to me about the idea that so much of diplomacy, it seems to me, has been, or seems to him, to all of us actually, has been sending out information and not listening to the other side. And one of the things that we really have to do is we have to shut up and listen. What is it? Somebody said, if you really want to make somebody think you're smart, is to just listen to them and nod when they're talking. And as soon as you open your mouth, you're going to show them how dumb you are, and I think it's really true. They'll think you're really smart if you shut up and go, wow, that's a great idea. So there's a diplomatic hint for you, okay? Just listen and say, oh, Ben, you're so smart, and then I think you're so smart as a result, But anyway, social media, but talking about Yulia, I work in Hollywood, and I've been there for 30 years, and we really boil communication and dialogue with other people down to the essence, to what I consider the cynical essence of communication, and that is, how do I reach the biggest number of people with my message? And it comes down to what we call the Tom Cruise effect. If you put Tom Cruise's face on a poster of a movie, millions of people are going to want to see it just because it's Tom Cruise. It could be a terrible film, and it doesn't matter because it's Tom Cruise and you're going to go see the film. And when I met Yulia a year and a half ago in Kiev, I saw a Tom Cruise in that face. And working in Hollywood in my business, we jump on those ideas. They're very, very unique individuals who come right through the camera lens and touch you. And when she made this little video standing on the Maidan in February, she sent me the video in LA, and my wife and I looked at it, and my wife said, you have to post this. You have to do something with this. Because she gasped when she saw Yulia's heartfelt plea for help from the outside world. And it became really, it was very clear that here is somebody who can communicate in a very unique and powerful way to everyone. And so that's why we posted that video, and within a week, 3 million people had viewed it. Within 2 weeks, 7 million people had viewed it. And in my country, congressmen and senators were telling us that they had never received so much pressure from ordinary citizens to do something about a country, Ukraine, where we didn't really have much interest. Most people in America didn't even know where Ukraine was. And so when you find an ability, a pathway like a Yulia Marashevska to communicate your message through, jump on it. They open doors for you. They open psychological heart. They open hearts, and there's all the other ways you may want to communicate things and create a diplomatic setting. When you find someone who has that open soul and that open spirit, make sure you partner with them, because they are the pathway into someone else's soul. I did a film a few years ago called Good Morning Vietnam, and it was my attempt to communicate the idea that the Vietnamese people were not subhuman, as so many American soldiers had come to believe. We were taught that so that we could kill them. You can only kill people that you think are not human. That you can't kill your friends. And so we made that movie, and it was another one of those opportunities to communicate to the world through comedy in this case. There was an actor called Robin Williams who played the role of the main character. And when you're wanting to communicate something to people that they don't want to hear, there's an old line from Mary Poppins. Anybody see the movie Mary Poppins? It's called A Spoonful of Sugar. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, and it's really true. If you want to deliver a message, deliver it either through a Yulia or a Tom Cruise or through a comedian. Somebody funny, somebody entertaining. I should have started out by saying a joke to you, okay? So you would relax and let me talk to you, but I didn't. So I'm not as good a speaker as the people I'm talking about. But deliver your message with a spoonful of sugar, deliver it with a joke, deliver it with an adage that everyone can connect to, and you will have an audience much more receptive to what you have to say. So, but the communication medium, social media, film, television, are all very, very important ways to stay in touch with each other. And I love the fact that there's Skype and there's Twitter and ways to have a dialogue back and forth. And never be afraid of somebody you don't know. That was what I took away from my hometown. Do not be afraid of a stranger. Make them your friend. So, I don't know what else to say. What else can I contribute to this bright group here that they probably don't already know anyway? You know.
Well, if you want, we can ask them.
All right.
All right. So let's maybe open it up before we do the applause to some questions and comments. Here you have a rare opportunity to talk to Ben Moses. So really, the floor is yours. Let's say if you could maybe just raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment or a question or share something with us, and also tell us where you're from, which country. I think that'd be interesting for Ben as well. Who would like to go first?
Well, thank you very much for coming. It's been really no questions at all. This is a unique thing.
Okay.
Oh yes,
excellent. Sylvia, do you have a mic?
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you very much for your speech.
I think, is it on?
Do you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Sorry.
My name is Silva, and I come from Romania. And I would like to ask you if you could perhaps tell us a bit more in terms of a developmental vision, if such a vision exists in Hollywood. And when I say this, I mean exactly the various events that are publicized and visible in the media that come from Hollywood in terms of fundraising galas for humanitarian events. We see that there are some high-profile actors that are connected to UN work and to various crises in the world. So I was curious, would you say that one can describe a sort of development in this high-power industry that is Hollywood, in terms of associating the film business with awareness in global crises or issues?
Well, one of the things that we do in Hollywood, that good movies do in Hollywood, is there will always be a message in a movie. I mean, that is the art of all of artistic effort. Actually, the foundation of all artistic effort. There will be a message there somewhere, and the best ones are delivered in such a way that they don't bang you over the head with them. In terms of development I'm not quite sure I understand your question. I'm sorry.
I wanted to say that do you see that there is more impact through the organization of these events in terms of awareness?
What
on
events?
global issues?
What events?
Different galas, for example.
Oh,
You
okay,
see,
okay.
You turn on the newspaper, the online newspaper, and then you see, oh, there was an Oscar humanitarian gala
Right,
in
right,
Hollywood.
right.
So there's a very visible connection between peace engagement and the film industry.
Well, the individuals in the film industry. There are many galas that are humanitarian based. Certainly, all of us have, all of us, I'm meaning you and everyone, have our own personal concerns about human rights and some issue that we would like to deal with. And when one gets visibility in Hollywood and can stand up and make a statement and be heard, they will bring their favorite concern to that gala. And oftentimes they're humanitarian galas where the funding goes toward supporting something like the ICD or something. And that's a really wonderful thing that people with visibility can accomplish. Yeah. I see two of you. Go ahead. Yeah. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for standing up. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Mats. I'm from Denmark. Speaking of, in recent years, there has been a very popular movement of independent movies from the US that has been quite famous in other markets. And that has made me think, because in Denmark what is known most abroad is things like Borgen, The Killing, those kind of things, The Hunt, that was nominated recently. But all are being, before they even put the first letter down, these movies, these TV series are being written for the foreign market. What I'm thinking is...
You're talking about from the Danish films are made for the foreign market?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And these all are exclusively made for the foreign market. What I'm thinking about here is how much is the Hollywood film industry and yourself thinking about this intercultural aspect of and applying that to the movies, or are you more, and how much is it more a question of that the world is so used to the Hollywood approach that you think that, okay, they will know about this from beforehand?
Well, when I used to teach at UCLA, I would open my class by saying, we work in a world that's called show business. It's not called show art. And the last word is business. In order to make a movie, you have to have money. In order to get money, you have to show that you will make money with your film. You can't get money for most films until you can promise somebody somehow, or you can convince them that the film will make money. If distribution into the foreign market is important for returning money to your investor, then you have to make a movie that has international appeal. However, we do have this sort of parochial attitude, this arrogant attitude that the rest of the world loves Hollywood films, and so we don't necessarily put in the first priority a concern for how it will be received in Denmark or France or South America or Ukraine. Although animation films are really wonderful because they can be translated into any language, and they're well received because we don't have to dub it and we don't have to do subtitles. You can just do another track in another language. So it is a business. How well will my product sell in these other countries is very important. And equally important, of course, is how well will it sell in the US. If I can show that I'll make money with my film, I can get funding for it. Although the truth is that no one really ever knows. There's been an adage in Hollywood since the beginning that if you know how to make money in movies, you're either lying or you're a genius. And there haven't been any geniuses yet that have lasted very long. They're geniuses for a while, but they always make mistakes. So.
Hello, my name is Tarina Cardwell. I grew up in Kentucky, about 30 minutes from the Illinois state line.
That's a foreign country to me, you know.
Yes, I know. Just across the Shawneetown Bridge.
I'm from Mount Vernon, okay?
I grew up just across the Shawneetown Bridge. So.
Oh, you're kidding. Not Paducah. What's Shawneetown Bridge? What's on the other side over there? Sorry, guys. Let me
Sorry.
just...
I grew up in Webster County. So
Oh, sure. Okay. I know where you are. All right.
And I also worked in production and television
Cool.
for CBS for a little bit.
Oh, great.
The Amazing Race, which highlights a lot of cultures around the world. And lowlights American culture a little bit for the sake of comedy. And I've also worked with CinemaCon, so Show West CinemaCon
Okay,
production.
yeah.
So when you're doing a film that has a very sort of cultural aspect, and you're really trying to convey a message, you've taken two different routes. You've done both. You've done the sort of the fiction film that's based in reality that was very successful and had a really broad reach. And then you've also done documentaries, which can highlight more specific and more recent events, but documentaries in general don't reach as wide of an audience. So there's so when you're looking to highlight issues around the world, conflicts around the world, to promote cultural diplomacy, how do you decide which tack you're going to take? If you're going to try to write a script that maybe and maybe do it a Hollywood-style film to highlight an issue like you did with Vietnam, or to go the documentary route, which may not get seen by as many people, but may be more truthful, be able to tell more detailed, truthful story about the culture.
Remember, it's called show business. Okay. Good Morning Vietnam took 9 years to get made. 9 years. So you're always working on something like that, but it's always on the back burner waiting for the right studio executive to say, yes, let's make your movie, or waiting for funding for it. In the meantime, you make your other projects. You do documentaries, you do television shows, you do, I've worked in the business for 40 years. I've always loved working in the business. I've come to a point where either because I can or because I chose to, and sometimes one day it's one and one day it's the other, I only really like to work on things I want to work on now. Sometimes somebody will offer you something that is a very nice business deal, but you say, life's too short. I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend a year working with this person or on this project, even though it would pay my kids' college for a year, And I've come over the years to that perspective. I'm just not going to do it. I want to do the things I want to do. I love the concept of the ICD. I love what you're doing here, and I would like to be involved. So I'm sitting here. Those are the choices you make as you get later in your career. But you make the documentaries because they touch your heart. I remember my father, I was making a lot of money in television years ago, and I quit, and I went off to make a documentary, which paid nothing practically. And my father came out to visit me from Illinois in LA, and he said, "What are you doing? You're broke." I said, "Dad, I'm feeding my soul." And that's what documentaries do. They feed your soul. And so either you're feeding your mouth or you're feeding your soul, and sometimes you can combine the two together. And luckily, I've been able to do that. But it's, just do the things you love to do, and somehow the food shows up on the table. Okay?
Thank you.
Working.
Yeah, there you go.
Now it's working.
There you go.
I'm Jorge Cordova. I'm
Mucho
from
gusto.
Colombia,
¿De dónde exactamente?
Bogotá.
Bogotá. Qué bueno.
Yeah. Basically, I have a couple of questions. The first one is if you are currently working or interested in another conflict zone in order to develop a project. And the second one, you are mentioning now that you changed from television to documentaries. So what was the inspiration, or any movie, any director, any fact that actually made you change, and if you can tell us about it?
The first question is what was the first question? Sorry.
About conflict zones. Because
No, I try to avoid conflict zones, honestly. I do. We went to Zimbabwe on a documentary a couple of years ago, and I was not happy being there. I was very happy to leave. But documentaries, I'm sorry, it's 7 o'clock in the morning in LA. Ask me the second question again, please. What was the second question? I'm sorry.
you mentioned that you changed from television to documentaries.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Well, I did a lot of television documentaries 20 years ago, and I won several Emmys for the work. And so that sort of established me as a credible documentary producer, or television documentaries. What motivated me to show business? What motivated me to get back into documentaries again? Actually, about 7 years ago, someone came to me. I was done doing documentaries for a while. It's very, very difficult to pour yourself into a very deep and painful subject for a long time in order to communicate it to an audience. It's very painful to do that. And I was tired of being in despair for months at a time in the editing room about things that I was working on. So I said, I'm not going to do any more documentaries. I'm going to do fun films, fun TV shows. And then someone came to me with a project on PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I said, no, I won't do it. And he said, how much money do you want? And I said, you can't afford me. I don't want to do this. I don't do documentaries anymore. And he honestly said, name your price. And it's called show business. And so I named a price I didn't think he could afford. And he said, okay. And so I made the film. And I got stuck actually committing to doing it because he agreed to my price. And then that sort of opened my heart up again to documentaries. And right after that, I was able I was approached about another film and able to spend 2.5 years working on it, 3 years actually, on activism and dictators around the world. Why do people stand in front of tanks like Tiananmen Square? And that's what brought me to Ukraine for the first time, and where I met the people that I'm now going back to visit next week in their elections and filming. But I get very caught up emotionally and intellectually in documentaries. They're harder to make. They're harder to make than a movie, a scripted movie, because there is no script to a documentary. You walk in saying, all right, here's what I think I'm going to get. And sometimes in order to get the funding for a project, especially with the television network, you have to present them with a plan. I call it the narrative outline. And it tells you, it describes the movie to them, the documentary to them. But it's all BS. You have no idea what you're going to get. You know who you're going to interview, you know what you're going to shoot, and as soon as you get out there, something else happens and you point the camera in another direction, and there goes your story in another direction. And so you're rewriting completely in the editing room after you've filmed. And that's the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. I'm a pilot, and I love to fly in bad weather. And there are two challenges in life for me. One is the editing room in a documentary where I really don't know what I've got, and I've got to make something really interesting. And the other is flying in terrible weather down to a landing where I can barely see the ground just as I'm breaking out of the clouds and landing. They both take an enormous amount of focus and brain power, and it's great fun. It makes life really interesting. So. Does that answer your question? Okay. What else? Anybody? Yes. Yeah. The guy with 2 questions. You might as well just leave the switch on, huh? Just yell. Yeah, maybe. That's a good idea. Just yell. Go ahead.
Yeah, recently, different actors in Hollywood, they started developing the King of Iran and his hotel franchise because...
The king of where?
Sorry, not Bahrain, Brunei.
Oh, Brunei. Yeah,
The
Sultan of Brunei.
the
Right,
Sultan
right,
of Brunei,
right.
and for example, the Hollywood Hotel.
Yeah.
And this kind of franchise,
Yeah.
and Leno as well did some things there. I will ask you, when does it become a disadvantage when actors go out and act in such a politically activist kind of way?
I think this one's a pretty good complaint, personally. But listen, America's just filled with people with ideas, you know, and we tolerate an awful lot of complaining. I always think that complaining is the only way to make things better. If you can't find a problem, then how can you make things better? My wife disagrees with me, but I don't. Every individual, every case is different. I really applaud the fact that people will stand up and say something, you know, like that. I really think that's great. That's what I love about my country. You know, we like to complain when we don't see when things are not going the way we think they should go. Half the time I don't agree with people, and the other half I do. But still, I respect their right to do it. So.
Hi, my name is Aika. I'm from Kazakhstan. I may have an amateur question, but still I'll give it a try.
An amateur?
Yeah,
Okay.
question.
All questions are amateur questions.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, so
I have a professional question for you. What is that?
basically there is a certain producers and directors have been saying that in the past decades, the directors were the decision makers when making the films. Currently, it's the producers. So they come in, as you said, with the money and with the funds, and they decide which director they want, which actors they want. So how would you comment on this development?
That's not true.
You would agree with
No,
that?
I don't agree with that. It really depends on the individual. If you are a Martin Scorsese or someone, or now David O. Russell, who just won an Academy Award, you can name everything. And that's those are directors. So it really depends on what the team, the makeup of the people are, and how much power they have individually. Sometimes the stars are in charge of everything. It changes from moment to moment, honestly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Giulia. I come from Italy.
Italy.
Yeah.
Okay.
South Italy.
Palermo.
Calabria.
Okay. Okay.
My question is about your movie about democracy, Whisper to Roar, and is about democracy. And I would like to know what is for you the link that all the democracies have, and why it's so difficult to have a democracy in a country like Egypt
Or Italy.
or Italy, yeah,
Or America.
Ukraine. Why is so difficult? Do we also need heroes?
Do we need what?
Heroes,
Heroes.
yeah.
Well, let me.
Do we still need heroes?
Yeah, we do. But let me tell you, I think what the fundamental issue with democracy is, in my opinion, this is just an opinion of someone who is not an expert, just an observer of life for many years. Democracy is really messy. It's really chaotic because everybody gets to talk all the time. And they have to have their opinions heard. And you get an Obama that we loved 44 years ago, 80% of the country loves him, today 20% of the country. You're always going to be hated as a ruler, you know. And in a democracy, you just have to put up with all that. And so I think the problem is when you come from a culture like Egypt, who has had pharaohs and strong men and, you know, self-made heroes or people that are put on pedestals, or like in Russia, where you've got Putin today and you've got czars yesterday and Peter the Great and all of that. I think a culture is accustomed to a particular understanding of governance. And I think it's very hard to break that with a democracy, because democracy is so messy and people go, oh, bring back law and order. I'll give up a lot of my freedoms if there'll be law and order, if I can have bread, you know? And we don't like to, America has this culture of democracy that's gone now 230 or 40 years. And we're lucky in that regard. But you've got to have very, very strong institutions. You've got to have very strong rule of law. You have to have a culture that says, yes, this is the way it works. And as soon as you start with a country like Egypt that didn't have that culture, didn't have that tradition, it's very hard to instill democratic principles and make them flourish, make them grow, when you've got people who really want to just go back to having law and order, okay? That's my opinion, anyway. Does that answer your question?
So what a country needs is a democratic culture.
You've got to grow the democratic culture. You really do. And, you know, in Ukraine, for example, you've got the next generation of people, the post-Soviet children, who are now 25, 30, some probably 35 years old, because they didn't have that instilled in them. And so they're now thinking toward the West. They're now thinking democracy. They're not thinking freedom of thought. Whereas the previous generations were all underneath the thumb of the Soviet Union. And so they had that culture difference. And they can't get out of that mindset. It's very, very difficult. You know, it's kind of like me trying to leave my religion when I was a child. I was a child of a very, very strict religion. And for years and years after I left my religion, I felt guilty. I was drawn back to it, even though I didn't believe in it. And the same thing with any kind of culture. You feel guilty for not maintaining the culture that you've had. It's more comfortable even though it's not as good for you. So you have something to say about that.
Maybe just as a follow-up question. So I agree with you. I think democracy can't be brought with the barrel of a gun, so to speak, or from the top down. So I agree with your points, but I want to ask you a more detailed question in the sense, what do we do then? So if we need some sort of a culture of democracy, first of all, can culture diplomacy do anything? Secondly, can film, media, social media do anything? Or if we agree with the fact that there needs to be a culture, you can't just bring this from above and all of a sudden, okay, organize opposition parties, etc. Can culture diplomacy do anything there, or do we just have to wait, or what do we do?
No, but that's what you guys are doing. That's why you're here. You are communicating all of those things. I mean, that little video you showed me about the hatter and the shoemaker, you know, those are exactly the things to do. You begin to put ideas in people's minds that they can be responsible for their own lives, and they have a right to certain rights, if you will. And it's an educational process, but it comes from the ground up. I really do believe it. And you guys you're the fundamental teachers of that to so many people around the world.
The footnote he's referring to is a video called the movie called actually The Shoemaker and the Hatter, which was one of the Marshall Plan films. I don't know if you know about this, but during the Cold War, actually the Americans and the British came up with movies to try to actually teach Europeans and former representatives of the Soviet Union about democracy, mass production, capitalism, etc. And the story of The Shoemaker and the Hatter is about exactly that, sort of the story of a shoemaker whose idea is to, actually first it was the Hatter, who has the idea of making very expensive hats, very small production, with a high profit, and really that people are going to buy these really beautiful hats. The shoemaker says, look, it's after the war, people need shoes. Let's mass produce these shoes, make as many as we can, make them as cheap as we can, and sell high volume. And it's sort of the story of these two shop owners and how they actually, their lives progress. And that was the way they were trying to get these ideas across the border at the end of the Second World War. Maybe a follow-up question for you. I'm not sure if you are aware of this. We were talking about Bassem Youssef earlier. If we go to Afghanistan, there is a fascinating TV show there called Afghan Star, which is sort of the equivalent of American Idol or Britain's Got Talent. Cynthia Schneider, a member of our board, has the thesis that TV show is actually helping to bring democracy to Afghanistan, a country that doesn't have a culture of democracy, a culture that's not used to everybody going to the voter ballot. Because in this TV show, everyone participates, men and women, all tribes, all aspects of Afghanistan, and almost everyone has access. Not everyone in Afghanistan has internet, but almost everyone has at least one or two cell phones, so SMS voting. voting. So suddenly you have participation of the whole population because they want to, because they're excited about it. So I don't think that's at all the intention of this TV show. But Cynthia Schneider says that's one of the effects, that a TV show like that may be designed for profit or entertainment or who knows. It was actually two Afghan entrepreneurs who started it, is actually bringing democratic ideas to a society not so familiar. So just as a follow-up question, do you have further thoughts about that? Specifically, what can be done, for example, in the Ukraine or in Tunisia or in Egypt? Is it up to the Bassem Yousefs or who can help there when it comes to bringing or creating a culture, if that is in fact what we should do, of democracy in these situations?
Well, I think one of the things that you have to start with an interested public, and I think what you're talking about is how to get the public interested in a way that they're not aware that this relates to government or politics, which they are suspect about. And in the case of Egypt, in the case of Ukraine, they never trusted their government. They didn't have anything to do with it. So yes, I think the idea that you can come in a social, cultural level or entertainment level and bring, this is back to the conversation about what can we do with social media and film and television is, those are great ideas. And maybe that's the challenge for all of you, is to come up with the next great idea that really will teach these points to people who don't have a culture of democracy. The other thing is corruption. People really have to make sure, individuals have to make sure through as a group, that corruption has to stop. You cannot. You've got to teach people why corruption is bad, even for the people taking the money. And I don't know, you know more about how to do that than I do, for sure. So.
Or organizations like Transparency International, they would argue that's the single biggest issue in Africa, preventing development in Africa. So it is a major issue. But again, how does one break situations and cycles like that? With corruption, there's two sides. There's the country, but there's also the other country that's actually giving the funds.
Right.
And it's a big issue. So I agree. But again, this has to do, how do you establish institutions and really different ways of doing business that are quite different from actually ways of doing business of the past? I don't have the answer.
Well, the old Soviet mantra was, if you're doing business with the government and you don't steal 60% of what they're giving you, you're a fool, something like that, And that's a culture, that's a tradition. And how do you break that? How do you say to the oligarchs, you should give half your money away? It's very difficult to teach that.
I can give you one example, actually, from somebody that many of us are familiar with, President Constantinescu, former president of Romania, one of the few Romanian politicians that I know of that, as far as I know up until today, has had really a totally clean record. So this is maybe the answer to your question. First of all, he's not a politician. He was an academic. He was a professor and a rector of university. Very briefly was president. He decided very early he didn't want to run for re-election because worried if that was his goal that might influence what he did while he was in office. He made it a point. Every time he had meetings, he always made sure there was an ambassador or somebody else sitting in the meeting. He wouldn't meet with people in private, almost as a rule, because of exactly that. He didn't want them to then come up with these things. So it was quite interesting. But really, very consciously, from the beginning, he tried to say, all right, what can I do to make sure I don't get put in a situation like that? And so I think there are things that can be done. And then in the end, he paid the political price, he always says, where he only served once. But many refer to him as Romania as the president because of that. So I think things can be done, but it takes courage, and it takes, as he says, paying the political price. He lives a relatively modest life in Romania right now, as opposed to many others who have maybe much more glamorous lives.
That is the issue. If you go into politics to make things better, not to figure out how to get reelected. Don't worry about how to get reelected. I'll tell you. Go ahead.
No, I'm listening.
I'll tell you a funny story about. I interviewed Václav Havel a few years ago for a film I was doing, and his deputy and I became friendly. And his deputy and I were, his longtime deputy and I were at lunch one day, and I said, it seems to me that there may have been only two great leaders in the world who were not corrupt in any way. And I said, one comes to mind as George Washington, and the other is Václav Havel. And when I named Václav Havel, he guffawed. Do you know what the word guffawed means? Like that. And I said, what are you talking about? He was corrupt? And he said, well, he wasn't corrupt in a malignant way, but he was corrupt in a benign way, because power corrupts everyone. And it's how that corruption is exercised, is used, is what's important to the human being, to the future of the country in this case. He was I said, how is it possible that he was corrupt? And he said, he came to power. He said, I'll be president for 1 year. Then the people need me. Fine, I'll be president for 1 year. 13 years later, he's still going, well, you know, the people still need me. I better stick around, you know. And so there it is. I mean, he was a wonderful, wonderful hero and a great human being. And yet the power got to him too. So that's the thing to always remember. Don't trust anybody with power. Don't trust anybody. Not even yourself, okay? I'm serious. I can give you examples in my life. Well, I'll give you one example right now. When we did Good Morning Vietnam, I was an unknown Hollywood producer. I worked in the business. And all of a sudden, Good Morning Vietnam becomes the #1 film of the year. It's huge. People are bowing down to me on the streets almost, you know. And we were doing the celebrity tour, the public relations tour of the film, and the Disney company, Walt Disney Company, made the film. Put me in these white limousines and flew me first class to all the fancy hotels around the country and around the world. And I was gone for 3 or 4 weeks, being treated like a king, literally. They can really turn your head around. And I come home, and I'm landing at the airport in LA on a Sunday, and Sunday afternoon, and I get out of this, first class airplane, and I float down to my car, and my wife's there waiting for me in the car, and she's been working, cleaning the house, and she's got sweat clothes on, and her hair's done up in a rag, and I get in the car, and I said, excuse me, you could have dressed a little better for me, I did. I swear I did. Talking about power corrupting, right? And so 2 weeks go by, and I think she gave me some lip. 2 weeks go by, and we're going to a premiere of the film in New York, and I fly into New York, and we go to this big club, and it's a wonderful evening, and we're all having cocktails, and I get on a plane, and the flight is late going back to LA. And it doesn't arrive until 3 o'clock in the morning in Los Angeles. And who meets me there but my wife, who is elegantly coiffed and beautiful hair and in a cocktail dress with a stole. Oh, my dear, it's so wonderful to see you. Welcome home, she says to me, right? And I go, okay, all right, thank you, I got it. Okay, yeah, enough said. And you need somebody in your life. As soon as you get power or position, you must have someone in your life who will do that to you, or else it can carry you away. And you know the word sycophant? People who say yes to you all the time, fire them. Really, don't keep people like that around you. It's very, very difficult when you have people who just say, oh, what a wonderful idea. Oh, that's so great. You're so smart. Get rid of them. Okay.
So I think our wives would have a lot in common, actually. I know exactly what you're talking about, but let's continue. This is your chance, Ben Moses. Other comments or questions? We're going to do an interview afterwards, but just before we go to the other formats, this is your chance.
I didn't hear anything from you. Ask me a question. Come on. Yes, you. Yeah, play. Thank you. I like to stand up, so too bad.
Okay, we're putting people on the spot now.
Yeah.
So.
See, I taught college for 14 years. So I used to go around to people who weren't paying attention and say, hey, talk to me, okay? Well, the girl next to you in the glasses. Yes, hi, what's your name?
My name is
Amélie from France. Exactement, oui. Quelle ville, exactement?
Hold on, microphone.
Excuse-moi.
Lille? In the north.
Ah, oui, Lille, yeah.
Yeah?
The train, the stop on the metro, yeah. I mean the TGV.
Yeah.
The Eurostar, yeah, okay, fine.
And no, actually, I have no question for you. I was just paying attention because
I just wanted to say hello, so nice to meet you. And
nice to meet you, okay, cool.
It's more fun when we do it this way, so.
Actually, Emily, maybe I have a question for you then, since you're French. But you may not know the answer. I don't know the answer to this. But France, of course, is a very interesting country when it comes to film, because there's a very different relationship between the governments and actually
the
film.
say and say. I love the say and say.
And this is a question for you too. I mean, my impression, and again, I may be wrong, is the American government doesn't really get involved at all with culture. In the sense,
That's
culture
right.
is
That's
the private
right.
sector. If you want to make money and sell movies, you can do it. I think that's correct. Although I know there were examples in the Cold War where actually there was some collaboration with Hollywood. So that's kind of one question to you. My question to you, Emily, I don't know the current statistics, but I know in the past there was also sort of some protectionism in France, where there were quotas on the radio, how much music could be in other languages. And I think, at least as of a couple of years ago, it was 1% of the GDP was actually invested in culture, where the government said, this is our job, this is important for us, we will support it. Actually funding film directors, films, etc. Actually, your name, Emily, one of the most successful films to come out of France, The Fabuleux Destin d'Amélie Poulain, as far as I know, was also governmentally subsidized. I'm not sure how much. And it actually wouldn't have existed were it not for governmental subsidies. So my question to you, Emily, in case you know, what is the current status or in France, in the sense, is there this policy still of protectionism and support? And maybe another question, if I'm not being too difficult, is how it works. Because I think the way it works is part of the ticket prices, when I go to see a movie in Paris, part of that ticket price actually goes to funding a French film. But can you give us any insights there? I'm not sure the current status.
Well, I know that in France we have the cultural exception. We want to preserve our culture. So maybe it's, the government wants to fund films, wants to help people making films, but I don't know if it's still hard because French films are not really well known all over the world. So I think we need to improve that, but I know that the government wants to work on it. So
I'll tell you a story. Someone asked me the question about directors being in charge of everything. When I lived in Paris for a while, and I went there as this Hollywood guy, and the networks, the television networks, said, "Oh, please, we'd love you to come and consult to our filmmakers for our television shows, because the directors have too much power, and they have all power. As a matter of fact, they're called auteurs, and they have so much power that they actually have what we call final cut. Even if a television network gives them the money, or the say gives them the money to make a film, they have the final edit control of the film. The network does not. In America, that's totally ridiculous. And whoever puts up the money most of the time gets final cut. And so I went and met with a lot of directors, and I said, listen, I'll be very happy to sort of give you the Hollywood perspective or the the American perspective on your films. And they were insulted. We do not want the American perspective on our film. We make perfect movies. Leave us alone. And so I did not do a lot of business in France because they were not interested in selling their films outside of France. They were only interested in making their vision of their movie in their language, and they didn't care. So it was a very, very different perspective. It wasn't called show business in my perspective in France. It was called artistes. And some artists are really wonderful, and you have some great people, some great artists, and you have a lot of people who think they're great artists whose movies would never be seen or even made if it weren't for the Say and other state-supported funds. Yeah, so.
In Germany as well, not to pick on the French, Germany I think also has a quota as of about 4 or 5 years as well, and it's actually getting to be a European trend, which I think in some ways, men, maybe you can give me your perspectives here too. I kind of like the idea in the sense globalization is not fair. So whether we like it or not, there are some cultures that are more dominant. You can call it cultural imperialism or whatever. So therefore, I'd just be curious on your thoughts, Ben. I mean, as you look at Europe right now, I mean, this is really a trend where, many European countries are saying, look, we should put limits here. I think Germany, it's only 20-30% on the radio, needs to be in German. Mm-hmm. Me as a foreigner, I like it in the sense when I first came to Germany, it was really difficult to get to know German culture. Now it's easier. I turn on the radio and I can hear German music. So I kind of benefit from that as a foreigner in Germany. It's easier for me to access German culture. What are your thoughts in the sense, would you take just the American approach, all right, culture is for the private sector? Is this something where consideration should be made? There's the thought that if we also lose our language, we're going to lose part of our culture. And everyday languages are dying. Or should we just have this anything goes policy, let the market decide? And if that is the case, what is the price we'll pay in terms of multiculturalism?
I honestly don't think we have a choice. I think 100 or 200 or 500 years from now, we'll have one language around the world. 500 years from now, maybe.
Chinese? Or?
Yeah, probably. living in France, when we were there a few years ago, it was every other song had to be in French, on the radio. It had to be 50-50. I don't know what it is today. It may be less. But I like the idea that they're protectionist, although it seems to me it puts them in a position of being weak, if you will.
Defense instead of offense.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. German, the same thing. I don't know what to do about that. I like the idea that the culture is supported until it leads to war. You know, don't support your own culture so extremely that you begin to think of everyone else as the enemy. That's all. And so be careful with that. I think that's what Putin has been doing in Russia, for example. He's defending Russian to the detriment of his own people and the world. So be careful how insular you become.
For me, I don't have a problem with it. Although for me, I think my emphasis is always innovation. We've got to innovate. Culture is not something we put in a glass jar, leave it on the shelf, and preserve it. You know, it lives, it breathes, it changes. And I think that's something that I think is a risk. If we are so concerned with preserving the traditions from the past, maybe we lose the balance, and we can't be really incubators. I think that's what makes Hollywood, so great. In the sense, it's a problem, it's a pressure. If I'm a film director, I've got to figure out how do I get the funds, how do I make something that's innovative. Otherwise, it won't work. And I think that's a positive pressure where you've always got to think quick. You've got to really be creative, and that's a risk. Maybe if one has governmental subsidies, perhaps maybe it's more comfortable. There's less of a risk. I can really do what I want to do, which is maybe not necessarily as innovative.
But yeah, I mean, I think the quality of the art is lessened. When you don't innovate. Even if I don't like it, I approve of people take artistic risks. And sometimes you need government funding to do that. You can't get Joe Dokes, who owns the grocery store, to fund your film unless it's something that he already likes. He's not going to take a chance with you. It takes government sometimes to fund the real artists. So I'm arguing against my own argument. Sometimes it's a great idea, sometimes it's not. But ultimately, I think there will be some common language, common culture long after we're dead. I don't think we have a choice but to go that direction. I mean, we're already seeing it. Look, how many of us here speak English? All of us, okay? And we're from how many countries? So,
Okay. Other questions or comments, Elvira? Do you want to take one of these or the court?
There's one.
Or? Okay.
Sorry, I missed just this very last part, so maybe you can have responded to that because you were talking on this on documentary and the artistic side, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore.
there you go. Whoops. There.
It will go in.
Okay.
No, my question was just, you are a documentary filmmaker, and at the same time, you also spoke about social media, and you know what is happening. And for me, it's really two very different products. The way they're done and the way they are consumed is very different. And what I feel is nowadays, I also come from the film industry, and I'm passionate about documentaries as well. And for me, the way now that everyone has access to a camera, everyone can do products with a phone, everyone can do everything in a very fast way, has certainly influenced the way also that we are consuming documentaries. And documentaries has another role now for maybe another audience, not as much for everyone, because maybe we don't have the time to consume this product, or because new generations are not so interested in this anymore. But how much this is influencing and decreasing the quality of audiovisual products, the fact that everyone has access and everyone is ready to consume maybe audiovisual product in a lower quality, because what matters more is the fast access to information, and somehow it's decreasing the overall quality of most part of product. I don't know how to explain this, but do you understand?
I do understand, yeah. Well, this happens with every generation. There will be an innovation. There will be a new way of telling a story. There's a new way of telling a story. It's called the GIF, or the GIF, however you want to pronounce the word. Everybody's always innovating, and it's for those of us who are gray a little bit, have to keep up, or we say, well, we'll do our thing, and we do it well, and the next generation, and then we work with younger generations of people so that we integrate the great ideas that they have into what we do, or vice versa. There is an educational process to the professional approach to the problem with everybody having a camera is that most people don't understand that the camera is not your eye, and you cannot tell a story with the camera the way you see it. You have to understand how that translates and what other aspects of it, like sound, music, everything else, go into telling the story. And that's an art that's learned, a craft even, that's learned. And I'm hoping that we're able to pass that along to the people who do have the cameras and can run out in the street and grab shots and don't worry so much about lighting or technical quality. There's still an art to telling the story. So it comes back from the Greeks.
Final question or comments before we go down for the interview? Yes? Okay, Sylvia?
You had
a couple?
You had
Okay.
one, you had one? Yeah.
Hello, my name. It's working? Or? Okay.
In red.
Okay, it's red.
Okay.
My name is Ralica and I'm from Bulgaria. And I just wanted to ask you if you can tell us more about your current projects and what you're planning on working on and what can we expect.
Everybody loves to talk about themselves. I'll be happy to.
So please. Tell us more.
Well, the Yulia project has sort of captured my attention. The Ukraine issue is now and it's present. They're voting next week. I'm going to the election. We're going to be filming there. I'm fascinated to be in the middle of the uprising. I was there in December, and I was filming in December because I can't resist filming when I'm in the middle of something interesting and I have a camera with me. So I feel like I'm able to tell that story from the very beginning, which is very unusual. Normally, you have to do it in retrospect, looking back at something. That's interesting. Another project I'm involved with is slavery around the world, which is a sort of an ongoing process that'll happen for the next year and a half or so. There's no timeline for that. It's a classic documentary that I'll probably wind up making in 2 parts or something. And we're doing some other projects with local and with American television. Things I don't particularly want to talk about because they're in early development stages. I'm talking with Mark about doing something with the ICD, and I'm trying to remember what else we've got going. There's some other people in my office have other things happening. We're doing something with a television network called Stars, but I just sort of focus on my own work, and my particular focus right now is what I just said. So,
Sylvia, final question or comments?
A final curiosity regarding a very stimulating contradiction that I have perceived that you indicated to. You said that you worked for 9 years.
I'm full of contradictions, so yeah.
And I think that it's good to have a very complex introduction into the history of contradictions, because it's never black and white.
Right.
So you have said that you worked for 9 years for a film.
No, I said it took that long to get it made. Yeah.
It took 9 years to make.
Right.
But you have not lost focus and you have not lost motivation, and meanwhile you have invested energy and ambition into several other little objects.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could perhaps give us a suggestion on how to handle, or what kind of how should we orientate our motivation in order to handle at the same time long-term goals that seem hard to achieve and pragmatic, beautiful everyday survival.
Thank you for that. I'll give you a very specific philosophical perspective that I have on that and on life, as a matter of fact. I don't believe that anything that I do has any benefit. I don't believe that anything I specifically do has any bearing on the outcome of my projects or my life. I believe that we are here to do, but we don't know the path. But if you want to achieve something in life, you have to believe that you can, but you don't have to know how. You just have to know that you will. and almost conceive of it as being done already. And all you're doing is getting on the train that goes there. And so every step that you take along that path is the right step to it, so long as you understand that it's the right step, even though you don't know what the hell you're doing. If that doesn't make any sense, then you've already started in the right path, okay? I didn't know that Good Morning Vietnam was going to ever get made. Stop. I knew that Good Morning Vietnam was going to get made. In fact, I knew that it was made already in my mind. I had it in my mind. I knew what the movie was about. I was telling people on airplanes that I sat next to the story of Good Morning Vietnam, and yet it took 9 years for that to actually manifest in reality. But you must hold the knowledge that it's done, in spite of the fact that you have no evidence that it is. And then you'll wake up one day and voila, it's done. And you go, that's magic. How did that happen? But it works. If I can give you anything, any bit of advice, that's my piece of advice. Know it's done in the face of no evidence. Know that so completely, and then someday you'll wake up and it's done. And you go, oh, all those steps I took, they led me to the completion of that project. But I didn't know it when I was doing them.
So Ben just summarized ICD of the last 15 years. So, no, with any initiative, but no, definitely words of wisdom. So, all right, well, no, thank you very much, Ben. We really appreciated the chance to have this interaction with you, to learn from you, to be inspired by you. It will continue, if everyone agrees, downstairs. We're going to do a smaller format for the interview, where we can go a little bit more into depth. But we really appreciated you visiting us here in Berlin. We look forward to collaborating in many ways, hopefully, in the future. And if we could all please express our gratitude to Ben Moses.
Thank you. Thank you.